Hello and welcome to another Thoughts per episode Doctor Who edition. Today we are talking about Season 1 episode 5, I think, Dot and Bubble. This is one of those episodes where when I saw it on the next time thing I was like, I'm not really, I don't know how I feel about how that episode looks. My first impressions were that it was very Black Mirror. That impression has not been quashed, and I know that behind the scenes they've talked about the fact that Russell T Davies pitched this idea to Stephen Moffat in like 2010, but they didn't have the budget to pull it off, and that thereby precedes Black Mirror, so it's probably just coincidental, the similarities. But nevertheless, this episode was ultimately made in a post-Black Mirror world, and yeah, it reminds me, like, if this episode was like, just, remove the Doctor Who elements from it and put Black Mirror on it, I wouldn't be surprised. That's not a bad thing, by the way. I do enjoy Black Mirror. But obviously, it became quite clear fairly early on, before this episode even aired, that this was going to be a commentary on, like, social media, and, like, if we continue on the trajectory we're on, the kind of world that's going to await us, and that kind of thing. And, I feel like social media bad isn't the hottest take, necessarily, in the world, so my expectations for this episode were fairly low, but I really enjoyed it. Obviously, as I was kind of concerned about, it was a commentary on social media and the horrors of it, and like having your nose in your phone so much that you're not looking up and seeing the problems that are occurring in the world around you. But I think that the problems that they actually used to be in the world were pretty fun, unique ideas. Like, in what other sci-fi story is the ultimate menace this really slow-moving, slug-inspired alien race that, like, only kills people in alphabetical order, so the danger isn't even that immediate. But society has descended so far into its own social media spheres that it fails to look up and notice what's happening until it's too late even then. One trait I noticed about the characters in this episode, specifically Lindy. Anyone who's finished the episode knows why I'm saying Lindy. Something I noticed about them is how avoidant they are. And I think it's because they've grown up in this social media environment where anything that displeases them they can just block, and I feel like that's almost a condemnation of a thing that's part of my personality, because I'm someone who very much says Twitter's not that bad as long as you mute all of these phrases and you block these types of accounts, and looked at from one perspective, that's a very avoidant strategy. I'm putting myself in danger of creating an echo chamber and avoiding all of the woes of the world and therefore not being able to help them. On a realistic note, I think there's a balance to be struck on that kind of thing, and we are more immediate to the woes of the world than we have ever been before, and I think we still have yet to really realise how that affects us as a people. I'm of the opinion that it is of no great coincidence that mental health is, at least seemingly, the worst it's been across civilization, and it's also around a time of social media being the prevalent thing. Just to give this episode a bit of context as well, I am weaning myself off Twitter. I mostly don't post there anymore. I just use it to read updates from people who aren't elsewhere and who I enjoy seeing, and I have already, as I've said, streamlined my Twitter experience with muted phrases and blocked accounts. But now I post over on Blue Sky, which is completely solving the problem, right? So yeah, this episode is very much an indictment on social media in many ways, to the point where this generation that have been raised on it don't even know how to walk without its assistance. And I think that's very on the nose, and I roll my eyes at it a little bit, and then I'm reminded of Lindy rolling her eyes whenever the Doctor is trying to help her, like, you can do it, you can lower the bubble and take the steps yourself, and she immediately feels like she's being pandered to. She is, let's talk about Lindy, because she is distinctly unlikable, and that's something which, I try to see the best in people, so throughout the episode I was going, well, clearly, you know, she's been raised in this environment and she's clearly doing her best for like the limitations that she has been given, or I guess imposes on herself. But there was this nagging unease the entire episode of, this girl is insufferable. And at first I thought she was being insufferable because she's meant to be this indictment against a civilization raised through all-consuming social media, but also it just turns out that she we can talk about the end of the episode later, but she's a horrible person. One thing I did really like, one detail I really liked visually about this episode, is the unsettlingly close camera to Lindy's face as this kind of like almost webcam perspective. Like, you can see her teeth in just too great a detail, and something I really liked is the pupils of her eyes were always like really, really small, because she's in a brightly lit environment where all of this information, like this information overload almost, is occurring, and it almost makes her look otherworldly in an unsettling way. Also, I know it's been done a million times, but I really liked the whole, as the episode progresses, the background detail of the city around her, the situation worsens, the weather worsens, the background details of people being eaten by these really cool, I love them, these really cool slug aliens. Like the horror of people being slow, like you see their legs twitching as they're being kind of very slowly munched, and it's kind of camp, and I really, really, really love it. Like, it's silly and it's absurd, and I think it's kind of meant to be, but it's not to the level of like the Slovene or the Bogeyman. And I really like the Doctor and Ruby's roles in this episode of these people who can't get in to help, so they're trying everything they can to stop this absolute takeover, invasion, wiping out of an entire civilization from the outside through this one person, and how they have to like slowly try to convince this almost indoctrinated character to do something that's outside of her comfort zone after a life of being pandered to and being put in a comfort zone. You get the sense that the residents of this place are practically underdeveloped children despite being adults in nature. Like, you also get things like, oh god, I held your hand, was that okay? Like, they don't have much contact with each other either. And now finally, let's talk about the end of the episode with the twist where it's revealed that Lindy's not a very nice person. Firstly, she lets her mega hot superstar idol die in place of her. In fact, she doesn't just let him die in place of her, she betrays him and tells the Dot, which is seeking her out to kill her, that actually he's got a falsified last name and he comes earlier in the alphabet, and kill him, and that gives her the time to escape, and she kind of does it almost without remorse. And it's this very quick switch up of a character from idol worship to I can use this person for my own ends. I was shocked when I saw that particular twist before the other twist, because Doctor Who very rarely deals with the dangers of altruism, which is you might be saving someone who turns out to be rotten and will not have other people's best interests at heart, and thereby may put other people in danger. And I already liked the episode, but at that point I was just like, oh, I love this episode. We're doing something new here for Doctor Who. And then, of course, the heartbreaking reveal at the end of the episode where it's revealed that this society, there's a reason why everyone's white, and it's because it's very much a... you get the impression it's probably like a white supremacist society or some like fascist-led society, which, has certain types of views we've seen in the past. Now, obviously, when Ncuti Gatwa was cast as the Doctor, the question came up, are they going to address the idea that not all eras of history they go to are going to respond to this incarnation of a Doctor the same way they would to previous incarnations? And I actually really appreciate that this subject matter was tackled somewhere else where we might not expect it. Somewhere I was expecting it from the Regency episode, for instance, but by tackling it at the end of a more futuristic focused episode, it catches you off guard, and it reminds you that like this is still a thing that we deal with. Well, not we, but this is still a thing that people deal with in modern society, and it may still be a thing that people deal with in the future, sadly. If we look back over the course of human history, It's not like World War II happened and then we beat fascism and we beat those horrible values and they've gone away forever and now we live in a peaceful utopian society. Sadly, no, they've recurred. And they may continue to recur if we don't actively continue to nip it in the damn bud. And I also felt like the Doctor's reaction was very in character for him, because if you look at least in New Who, which is what I've seen, I can think of instances of every single Doctor raging against the ignorance of certain people leading to their own destruction or other people's harm. I think of Christopher Eccleston yelling about stupid apes. I think of David Tennant being in that midnight car. I think of Matt Smith with the Star Whale. I think of Peter Capaldi with the War Room in the Zygon invasion/inversion. I know Jodie Whittaker's Doctor has plenty of moments like that. You know, the subject matter might be a little bit different each time, but it's the same rage, it's the same frustration of, you know, these people, they're doing it to themselves. And of course, there's only so much perspective I can give on this as a white guy. I've never been a subject, obviously, of racism. But I thought Ncuti Gatwa's performance was very moving. And Millie Gibson standing next to him as well, I think did a fantastic job of just being, like, disgusted with with what he was being met with and trying to find some way to comfort him. And I loved, by the way, I loved that the Doctor's first reaction was, fine, whatever, I don't care, you're going to die, come with me, I'll save you, I don't care what you think about me. That felt very in character for the Doctor, and then the further frustration when they just continue to back away from him. I think it's important that the Doctor still sees their lives as worth saving, even despite the fact that they're these horrible people. Because, you know, there's always time for someone to change their ways, etc. But I guess you could argue it's also him trying to remain stubbornly with his worldview of altruism, despite being faced with the exact opposite. And, you know, I'm sure this video is going to get some comments if it gets the views. And I've already seen some comments online as well of people who just fundamentally don't get the message and who want to debate, like, yeah, but... and I just think, like... I'm not going to give those people oxygen. If your knee-jerk response to a message in a story like this is to find a debate in it that, I guess, positions it as a thing that's done, you know, maybe not done badly, but a message that's not worth telling for some reason, or a message that you feel threatened that they're including diversity for whatever reason, I just don't need to humour people who try to push that kind of argument, I think. And given that certain people in the quote-unquote fan base have already been shitting on everything Ncuti does for, you know, ulterior reasons, like you can dislike him, you can dislike him and say that he is not for you, but there are so many people who are clearly, like, finding fault in tiny things he does, which are very hard to find fault in, I think. You know, it is very suspicious, and I don't doubt that some of those people have ulterior reasons for those beliefs, and I am interested, I'm not that interested, I'm a little interested to see how they're going to react to this episode, which kind of points a finger directly at them. Obviously, this is a very extreme example. This feels more like 1940s, like, overt racism at the end of this episode, whereas a lot of today's racism is a bit more subtle, a little bit more insidious, I guess. It's less... yeah, well, I'm not an expert. I'm a white guy, so... It moved me, I guess that's all I really have to say. And ultimately, I really enjoyed this episode, and I thought it was effective in the messages it wanted to tell, and I also thought it was just genuinely a fun watch. I mean, a fun watch might be a weird way to put it, given the ending, but, like, yeah. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Thoughts on Doctor Who. Let me know what you thought, if you like, in the comments down below, and leave a like if you liked the video. I will see you in whatever I make next.